Welcome to tonight's LX Views. We'll be exploring Uptown entrances from the northwest. Here we are on North Tryon Street. This is a fairly lengthy entrance into Uptown. You may recognize the intersection from a video I did over the summer where I rode through Camp North End. That's nearby. In case, here we are heading south on North Tryon Street. To the left of us is a large rail yard. That's where I believe Norfolk Southern rail yard is. And we will be crossing over the Norfolk Southern tracks as well as the CSX tracks that we crossed over earlier. So this is the definition of the old town, the old city limits, where there was this industrial city. Here we're on the other side of the tracks, and you can see some of the buildings are from the early half of the 20th century. They kind of have an Art Deco look. We're descending down, so it's not as obvious as earlier where there was a clear creek, but we're descending down. We're going to go underneath some railroad tracks. And then we'll be in this sort of transitional zone between the railroad tracks and the inner beltway of 277. And we can get in touch with the sort of development that existed within Charlotte prior to the second half of the 20th century when it became the commercial hub that it is today. So, sort of a really vintage experience going underneath these rail tracks. And then to the left there's a road there that connects to a repurposed mill called Optimist Hall. Sometimes I'll go there and get coffees and daydream. It's an old textile mill. You can walk around. It's nice in the winter and in the summer, but especially nice in the winter because they have those big windows that 19th century mills had. And I think they were placed there just because of its proximity to the rail connections. But okay, so here we are in between. We're in this transitional zone where we've crossed over one set of railroad tracks, and the video doesn't necessarily do it the most justice, but if you look further blocks in, you can see still to this day light industry, light manufacturing, and a lot of like scrap business, scrap-oriented business as well. So it's maintained its industrial heritage to this day. And the interesting thing is I remember coming into Charlotte from the south, and we'll discuss this in subsequent videos, and there were still examples of not necessarily like abandoned buildings or bombed out buildings, but I guess somewhat abandoned. There was but factories, like vestiges of industry, and that's all been replaced with these really gleaming office towers. It's fantastic, if you ask me, marvelous. But here we are. We're going underneath another set of railroad tracks, and I discovered, I didn't realize this, up on the left there's an old railroad station which has been repurposed for the unhoused. I think it's a men's shelter. But maybe one day I'll be able to. You can kind of see it if you look. You can see like an old rail platform with the freight train passing by it. Decades ago, that used to be passenger. And this must have been a much more important intersection, that means, right? Because this was one of the two major train stations. And I don't know from what points you'd be exiting here, but it was grand enough that they had a train station. But this hill here is a formidable obstacle. I actually had to re-gear my bicycle so that I could both shoot and with the GoPro and still climb this one-handed. But we're about to enter underneath the expressway from the 20th century. I think this is called the Brookshire Expressway. It looks like there's an off-ramp that we crossed over and then crossed under, and now we're going under the main. And just the scale of this is really substantial. I mean, I think it's 8 lanes in total, 4 lanes each way, not accounting for exits. Really ambitious stuff that they did in the 20th century. But here we are. Then we look and we can see the 19th century city with that beautiful stone church, which is now an arts center. The kids and I actually went to an event where you could do your own creations. And it was a really nice way to spend a fall morning in Uptown. So it's a nice resource. Now we're here at the North Church street. So here is like the South at its, or Charlotte at its most sort of historical. You can see the railroad there, and then there's an actual foundry building. So these used to be much more ubiquitous throughout Uptown. From what I understand, all of like Third Ward used to look like this, and it wasn't making any noise. I didn't hear anything originating out of it, but I can only imagine the racket. You think 19th century, so coal-fired trains with their loud steam engines making smoke everywhere, and then on top of that, it's a foundry, right? So they're pouring steel, they're hammering steel, they're making wheels for wagons, and whatever else. From what I understand, Charlotte had a fairly healthy bellows industry, in addition to cotton spinning and cottonseed oil processing. These were the industries that sort of sustained the area, but its proximity to the coal hills and also the iron hills just allowed it to naturally develop as a metals processing center. Plus, it had that heritage from its mining days as well. But this is a really quick entrance. We basically just go under the highway because you can't cross over the railroad tracks. So very quick, you go from the 19th century to the 21st century, basically, with that building. Here's an exit off the Brookshire. And you can see there's that 1950s suburban style landscaping, and then a little bit of the industrial city, and then the commercial city, and that's it. And in the middle of the 20th century, they built the exits really close to one another, and it's some people may refer to it as a flawed design, but because it makes it really hard to exit or enter, but that's what they did because they didn't really understand highway planning. But here we are in the middle of Fourth Ward. You can see the old houses. It's beautiful. And then here's North Graham Street. So we're going to start at the intersection of almost Statesville Road. So this used to be the road to a town called Statesville, there's an Allman Brothers song called Statesboro Blues. And I have to imagine Statesville and Statesboro are probably kindred spirits. It's a small town, and it's in Iredell County. My spouse and I have been there. We used to go there for barbecue, but our favorite barbecue place there is no more. I think it had a kitchen fire or something. But this was a major entrance into town. It's the old federal highway, still to this day, and it was a major crossing. And we had to cross. We were going to cross over two different railroads, and then go underneath a highway. But this is among my least favorite places to ride my bike, just because the speeds are very high. Folks are coming in from the late 20th century suburbs, and they've been on these roads they got federal funding, and then when we built the interstate, we never made the road smaller, so people just go fast on them, and traffic's light because the heavy traffic's on the interstate, so you can go fast enough. There's stoplights and stuff, but anyway, the upshot of it is I try to avoid it on a bicycle, especially this section. But you can see that old manufacturing building there. It's kind of cool. And then behind that, you can see the grain elevator, which we'll explain. Or I don't know what that is. Maybe it's a grain elevator, it's a silo. I don't know what it is. It's this old relic, and we'll see it much more closely as we really explore the northeast entrance. So now we're on the other side of the railroads. We're on the other side of the interstate, and we're going to cross the railroads at grade, I believe. But we're near the music factory. So on the left-hand side is that industrial building. It looks like some sort of elevator. We're going underneath the interstate. Look at how big that is. I mean, the fact that humanity was able to marshal the resources to build something like that is astonishing. But then to the left, you see the industrial facility. It's brought here by the rail, and then we're in this like really sort of low-rise industrial park feel. But what's interesting about it is a stone's throw from one of the top 10 commercial strips, or top 20 commercial strips in the country. And but we're going to cross over to get into Uptown. We're going to cross over at grade. And this is a lengthy trip through the pass. So we're on this road, and you can only do this traversal on bicycle. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to cut through an old cemetery, graveyard, whatever you want to call it. And that was Charlotte right there. You look at it, red clay, and just nothing really. A big factory. But for whatever reason, the city decided to make the connection to Uptown, kind of partial Uptown, in that like it's inside of the. When we explore the west side, the interstate is actually on the outside, and the railroad's on the inside, which is sort of the opposite. We're coming from the north, where the railroad was on the outside and the interstate's on the inside. But the bike path cuts through this old cemetery, and I don't know if I want to really delve into its history, except to say that like I cut through there once at night, and it gave me the heebie-jeebies. But it was a nice day that day. The sun was shining. It was pleasant. It was warm. It's nice not to have to fight the traffic. I mean, it's not a greenway. It's something totally different. I remember reading in the history of one of the major cities that like before there was this big impetus to build parks. That's where people used to go and have picnics with cemeteries, and it's amazing how like over time more norms change, morals, what's socially acceptable changes, and it becomes unacceptable. I would never ever have a picnic in the cemetery, or any cemetery really. But yeah, so now we're back in Uptown, and we'll explore this in a different video, I think. But there's a railroad, it's always running. The rail is still very active within Charlotte. All right, so that was from. All of these are feeder streets into that cemetery cut through, basically. But here's like a 1950s subdivision style neighborhood. So we're perilously close to an area that I read about in the history books. It was an area called Greenville, and it was a historically black area that the housing was certainly substandard, but the way that it was in the 20th century, middle of the 20th century, the people that were living there were being exploited. I think they were largely renters, and the ability to accumulate generational wealth just never, the conditions never happened to support that. So it's, but anyway, this is where this whole area that we're looking at, especially an interchange that we're going to see a little bit further. So I think behind us was like Oak Lawn or whatever. And it's an interesting place now because like I don't know who owns the homes in terms of like if it's a renter neighborhood or an owner-occupied neighborhood, but it's close to some pretty substantial new development. And if you watch my walking videos where I went through McCrory Heights, it's over by McCrory Heights. I think it's on a slightly different side of one of the streets, but it's on the different side of Beatty's Ford, but it's over by there. But yeah. And then Hamilton Street. So this street is over by. This is much more by where that Greenwood neighborhood was. There's a nice park here now, and when they built 77, so I was talking about that Graham Street and how the city replaced it with the interstate. That interstate will see the interchange between 277, the Inner Beltway, and 77, which is both in one leg of the Inner Beltway as well as the route to. The suburbs, and then on points northward, conceivably up to Pennsylvania and Virginia. But we're crossing over this bridge here. I kind of stumbled across. I didn't even know it was here because it doesn't really connect to much. But then if you look at this interchange, I mean, it's amazing that we can build level over level after level. One night I was over here, I was just watching the cars come through, just marveling at the headlights. It was nighttime, so you could see like the warmth of the headlights, and it was every 4 seconds there was another car, and I was astonished by that. But then in the distance, underneath that ridge line, over above the ridge line, I watched 2 jet airplanes just whatever take off from the airport, and I was listening to this old Jamiroquai song from the Godzilla soundtrack, and I was just like, my mind was blown by, because it's when you come to a place like this where you can see, I mean, looking at that creek there with like the the nature growing around it, you can almost feel like the agrarian Charlotte, right? There's very few places in Uptown where you can still feel the agrarian Charlotte, but that's one of them, right? And then to see that juxtaposed against not just one, but two jet planes at night, full lights, like they were racing, was just... It set the stage for me to appreciate the context. It recontextualized something that is sort of commonplace and ubiquitous as seeing a jet land or jet take off. And it's amazing, right, that we in the 21st century have now been living for 2 or 3 generations where you can drive 15 minutes to some facility and then in less than a day be on the complete other side of the world. And I don't think we truly appreciate what impact that's going to have for humanity in the future. It's wonderful, right? I mean, I think in the 1950s, what the dream of the 1950s and the dream of the modern society was for using technology to bring about global peace and global understanding. And it got lost in the mix in that sort of really bum trip second half of the 20th century. But I was able to really just on that bridge get have it recontextualized for me and reappreciate sort of that old philosophy, that old perspective, and it really made me optimistic, which I deeply, deeply, deeply appreciated. But here we are, sort of riding parallel to the railroad tracks, past the old low-slung industrial buildings, which we've since repurposed as event spaces to partake in music. They have indoor concerts, outdoor concerts there year-round. Sometimes you get some pretty big acts. All the national acts come in. And we're back to the feeder road to go through the cemetery. So that was like the last of the north approaches. Now we're coming in from the west side. And this is North 5th Street. We're going to cross over 77. That's the interstate. By this point, we're on the other side of that interchange, but we'll see it. I'm sure I'll pan on it to look at it because it really is breathtaking to have something like 8 lanes, 12 lanes of traffic converging, and it just moves smoothly. And then we'll go over what's called Irwin Creek. And again, that's that just natural barrier that's always been there. And then we'll climb a big hill, and this is the Golden Hill. So this side of the hill, especially as we go further south into the next video, this is where the mining actively took place in the very first half of the 19th century. But it is a steep hill, and you'll probably hear me breathing heavy multiple times as I climb this hill. I ate so well after filming these footages. I had like an insatiable hunger. But what strikes me about here, looking at old historic books of Charlotte, is I know there were homes here, and if you look at that parking lot, I mean, they are the same size as homes. There was a lady, she liked octagonal homes, I guess. She lived somewhere over here. I don't know if it was on 5th Street or on Trade or what. But from what I understand, this area sort of fell in the second half of the 20th century into, much like where we were on the other side, we're on the east side, into a state of disrepair, and it was slumbering, and it got cleared, and then they replaced it with this large development. They call it the Gateway Center. It has apartments, there's some office space, there's a university there, a cooking university, I think. I haven't actually checked out. I think that's an old school on the left, or a current school. So there's a lot still, and so that there's a split off there to go up 6th Street. We're gonna go slightly out of order. So the cemetery is connected. So the path through the cemetery is connected. Now we're on 5th Street, and we're just continuing to climb the hill. We're gonna go underneath the tracks, and I don't know if the bus station. So I think the historically this rail. I've seen pictures of Charlotte where this was like the tracks were on the ground, and like there's pictures of people in like 1950s cars just waiting for for the train to go by. And you see in these videos how frequently the trains go by. Must have been quite a bottleneck for traffic. But we're continuing to climb, continuing to climb, continuing to climb. And there's a little low rise that made it. It's on the side of the tracks that made it, I guess. And here we are on Graham, which is, again, that old federal highway. They just kept it 4 lanes, 6 lanes north of the Beltway. So 6-3 is that little spur. So I think somewhere over here is the connector to the old graveyard. I think you might be able to see it coming up ahead. Yeah, that's it on the left. And then, so that would connect us back to that old, where we were by the music factory. And this is a cool new bike lane they added, gosh, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I guess it's not that new anymore. Now when we go under these bridges, what I think is cool about it is you can see multiple foundations. So I think on 6th Street, there wasn't an at-grade crossing. And you can see historically there were different bridges that they've just sort of continued to build on top of. And that happens in a lot of places throughout Charlotte, not just for rail, but also for road bridges over creeks and stuff. You see it on greenways and stuff. But here we are. We're coming up towards the end of our evening. This is 6th Street in Graham. I think it's kind of a dangerous intersection, but I might be biased. I personally got in a wreck here. But anyway, that's it. Have a good next time. Until then, check you later.